turning up. This talk came about because Mark and I were having a coffee in early December, and I was just, battering his ears like I normally do. And he said, "Why don't you come and give a talk at one of our events?" And so that's really why I'm here. And what we were talking about was why the big Gen AI impact isn't really about jobs, it's about culture. So as Mark said, I run the Centre for Creativity Enabled by AI. That was named by an academic, not me. I'm not an academic. They love silly names that they can crunch into acronyms, which is CBAE or SEBAI or KEBA, which is how people say it. We're based at Bayes Business School, which is part of City St George's, University of London, and we were funded by Research England. So the research project started in 2020, just as I had actually finished doing a master's degree in business creativity at Bayes Business School. So they were looking for somebody to run this research team. And having run businesses myself, I was really interested in the idea of how you get IP out of a university and into the commercial sector, because it seems to me we are not very good at doing that. As a business owner, I would never have gone to a university to look for, even a business university, to look for help. So I was quite interested in working on this project, particularly because I was working with a team of coders who were already using large language models and machine learning to create digital tools to help businesses to think more strategically around innovation and creativity in their businesses. So that's what we've been doing for the last 4 years, and we have a couple of tools which I will show you at the end. But what I really wanted to talk to you about this evening was the kind of around the hysteria that we are seeing at the moment around this big new technology wave. This makes me laugh. Automation will eliminate 73 million jobs. That was a McKinsey report in 2017. They revised it down in 2021 to 45 million job loss. And then you see these headlines: 8 million jobs lost, shrinking workforces, 60% of jobs worldwide lost to AI. I mean, we might as well pack up and go home. And this was my favorite, my personal favorite. And I think this was what started our conversation, Mark and I, was this 300 million jobs. That's just, look, I'm laughing, and I shouldn't laugh because I know a lot of business people who are terrified by these headlines, and a lot of people who are worried they're going to actually lose their jobs. Thankfully, there are saner heads prevailing in the World Economic Forum. So they do a Future of Jobs report every year. Are you aware of this? Yeah. And so the most recent one came out in January. And so they speak to about 1,000 global employers who represent 14 million workers worldwide, 22 industry clusters, 55 economies. So it's fairly broad, and they reckon that, yes, there will be about 92 million jobs lost, which is about 8% of the workforce. But they also said there's going to be about 170 million new jobs created. So that's a net job churn of 22%, or a growth of plus 78 million jobs. And we don't see those headlines in our clickbait world. And that's a much more interesting headline. Of those figures, what do you think is the most, what's the one that stands out the most for you?
Well, jobs gain.
That's good, the jobs gain. I'm more interested in the churn. I mean, that's almost a quarter of the workforce will be losing or gaining a new job. And I think what that means is that what we're looking at is a period of change, real social change, but it doesn't have to be negative. I mean, historically, every technological revolution has brought change. You think about the Gutenberg press or the steam engine. There's a great statistic that in the US, after steam engines were introduced, the sector expanded sevenfold, from employing 1.2 million in manufacturing to 8.3 million in about 40 years. It's just that we don't know what the jobs are. Okay, there's going to be churn. Sure, AI will impact a lot of jobs, but we don't know what the opportunities are yet that it's going to explore or open up for us. So it might be a better idea if we think about tasks rather than jobs. I think what AI will really do is it will change the tasks that we do, and our job titles might change. But if the tasks are going to change, then the skills we need to do the tasks will change as well. And that's the really important bit, I think. So in the Future of Jobs report, I'll just blow that up a bit for you. These are the skills that are needed right now in business. And you can see that in number 4 is creative thinking, okay? And creative thinking is quite important because we don't actually teach that skill at school. In fact, we teach it out of students at school. There is a thing called the Torrance test, creativity. It was started in the 1960s by a guy called Professor Torrance, and he has a set of tests that he applied to children, actually, when they entered school. And it was, it's really standard creativity stuff, like here's a ruler, what are 100 things you could do with this ruler? And children, when they enter school, when they're 4, score about 90 to 95% on that Torrance test. By the time they've been in school for 2 years, what do you think their test scores were?
What do you say?
Lower than that, they were 30%. And by the time they graduate, what are their scores for creative thinking? Yeah, it's around 5%. Because what we do is we stop people thinking creatively about solutions in a Western academia and in some places in Asia. You teach the test, you teach people to learn by rote, you tell them there's one correct answer, there's one way to get to the correct answer. And what that does is it just shuts down their creative problem-solving faculty. So by the time they come out of the school system into the work environment, one of the things that they really need, we've taught out of them. And I would argue, and many people argue, that if you look at that list, creative thinking actually underpins many more of the items on that list. I mean, what would you think you would need creative thinking for on that list? Analytical thinking. Can you be analytical if you don't have creative thinking skills?
Talent management.
Talent management, you have to really think creatively.
Yeah.
Leadership. Yeah, you're right. All of them.
Majority, yeah.
All of them require creative problem-solving skills, and it's explicit on the list, and we're not really teaching it. And I think that that's a real problem, and that's one of the skills that we need to address in our society quite quickly. And there's a reason why we are creative thinkers, because creativity. This concept is from a guy called Gerard Puccio, who works at the Centre for Applied Imagination in Buffalo. And the question was, why do we have creative problem-solving skills? And all humans, everybody in this room is creative. We're all creative to a larger or lesser degree. And we are, because we needed to be creative in order to survive. We're not the fastest. We don't have the biggest talons. We don't have big teeth. We don't have armor skin. We're not the largest. Our survival as a species really relied on our ability to outthink our predator competition. And so while our creative problem-solving skills started as a means of survival, they've kind of moved on to art and to innovation. And I was at a tech summit in Portugal, which is a massive expo in November, and I saw this really fascinating talk about the development of cognitive technologies, and it was by a lady called Danielle Persick, who's a cognitive scientist at Amazon AGI. And what she was saying is that our cognitive technologies have grown up like this. First of all, we were non-verbal animals, and we all thought our own thing, and we all had our own view of the world. And we developed language in order to communicate ideas in what's called interthinking. When we share ideas and we explain what we think about the universe, and somebody else explains what they think, we come to a consensus. And it was language that actually enabled us to build consensus and work together to outmaneuver the other predators in our ability. And so this ability to, in our environment, the ability to interthink is one of the most important products of our evolutionary history. And this probably happened about 200,000 years ago when we morphed into the modern Homo sapiens that we are now, and we developed our voice boxes. So after our language, communication and representation of the universe that we lived in, we started to draw pictures on the walls to depict what we were seeing. And the drawing kind of developed into writing because we started to do shorthand drawing that became cuneiform. And simultaneously, I think this probably happened about the same time, we developed numeracy and mathematics. So numeracy came from the tally drawings that people did on the walls. And that's how they started to think about numbers and maths. And all of those cognitive technologies developed into logic, which is thinking about how things work in relation to each other and the universe. And logic gave us the ability to create machines. And when I say machines, I'm talking about complex machines with levers and gears, not stone tools. Because actually a stone tool is a machine, but it's a fairly rudimentary machine. But machines that actually have working parts probably came next. And then we get to computers, which is logic and maths and machines all combined. And now we're at the stage of AI tools. These are all just cognitive technologies. They are abstractions of cognitive technologies that is part of our human journey that we've been doing for years and years. And tomorrow, something else will evolve. And all of these technologies are what we would call tools for thought. And that begs the question, which is what all the AGI scientists are working on, which is what does it mean to think? And one thing that these technologies all have in common is that they come from and are developed to support human cognition. And there's a really neat symmetry, actually. Large language models that have given rise to the chatbots we have today actually came about at the end of World War II. So in 1945, the global consensus was, how do we create ways to trade peacefully, to hold peace talks? Can we automate language so that we can understand each other? And so they put some scientists on that to develop language models in order to help us to share our ideas. And that takes us right back to the start of the journey, 300,000 years ago. I thought that was quite a neat little circularity. So the question, what does it mean to think, is what people are grappling with at the moment as they're trying to program general intelligence into machines. And there is a way, I don't know if you know Bloom's taxonomy. It was developed by a guy called Benjamin Bloom in 1956, and it was revised in 2001. And it's a way to consider the learning stages of the human thought process. So you've got the lower order thinking skills, which is remembering, understanding, applying the knowledge that you have, analysing the outcomes of the knowledge, evaluating the knowledge. And the very, very highest top of the pyramid is creativity, creating from all the knowledge that you have. So that is actually what we think is the taxonomy of cognitive thinking, and creativity is right at the top of that. And it's quite interesting, and I'm guessing because you are all IT and IT adjacent, you like maths, because there is a formula for creativity, and I love this formula. I'm not maths nerdy, but I'm a real fangirl of Professor Ruth Noller. So Professor Ruth Noller worked on the very, very first computer, the Mark I computer, that was at Harvard, and they set it up in about 1944, and it was about 60 foot long. It filled a room. It was like 2 double-decker buses parked back to back. And it mapped all of the US Navy ships and where they were all over the world. And her job as a young intern in her early 20s was to just keep the machine going. You know, it had a massive camshaft and it had paper bits that it printed out. And one day the machine actually stopped. And it was her job to work out what was wrong with it. And she had to check all the components, and she found the culprit. It was a moth that was stuck in the machine. And she wrote in her notebook, problem identified, it was a bug in the machine. And to this day, that's why any error in computer coding is called a bug in the machine. And it was Ruth there that coined that phrase. At the end of the war, she became very interested in how you program computers to think more creatively. And she actually set up the School of Applied Imagination at Buffalo State University. And from the 60s onwards, she spent her time trying to really work out what creativity is. And being a mathematician, as an older lady, she came up with this formula. So let's see if we can work this out. So her formula is that creativity is a function of A multiplied by KIE. Anyone guess what those letters stand for?
Knowledge.
Knowledge, correct.
Innovation.
Innovation.
No.
Information.
Imagination, very good.
Entrepreneurship. Expression.
E,
Emotion. Empathy.
no. Close. You are close, because the A is around emotion and empathy. The A stands for attitude and the E stands for evaluation. So this was her, I don't know how to get that little OK off the bottom there. Creativity is dependent on your knowledge, your imagination, and your ability to evaluate, and it's multiplied by your attitude, your personal attitude. And what's interesting, I think, to me, is that in a world of really powerful AI technology, the computers now have all the knowledge in the world. You know, they've eaten up everything. They're very, very good at evaluation. I have no idea how anybody is going to write code for imagination and attitude. So imagination is, its dictionary definition is the ability to think of that which does not yet exist. So if you imagine that large language models can only refer back to what exists, how are they ever going to imagine something that's not there? It's what the human brain does. And attitude, our personal attitude, well, how on earth can you code for that? It depends on whether you've had breakfast this morning, whether your mother loved you, whether the man in the street bumped into you, you know, whether somebody smiled at you. What your condition is when you start to work on a topic, it's your personal attitude. So in terms of how we work with computers, I think it becomes quite clear what the humans bring to the party and what these machines can do. They've got all the knowledge and the evaluation, but we're bringing the imagination and the attitude. So why does it matter anyway? Because we don't really talk that much about creativity in business. We talk about innovation. All the time we talk about innovation. And in fact, the Lord Mayor, Alistair King, has just launched a report called Growth Unleashed. And he said what he really wants to do is to get businesses innovating. And nowhere in that report does he mention the word creativity. So I thought it was probably worth discussing a little bit about this. So creativity is defined academically as the ability to think up things that are new and useful, at least to the person, okay? So there's different degrees of creative thinking. You can have sort of step, stretch, and leap. Step innovation might be me coming up with a new way to walk to the bus stop in the morning. Okay, it could be quite creative and it's good for me, but it doesn't affect anybody else. It's still creativity. A stretch type of creativity or creative thinking might be changing how we organize this room so everyone feels much more comfortable sitting in it. So it affects a few people. And then you've got the really big leaps of creativity, which is the stuff that takes us to the moon or comes up with cures for cancer. So creativity doesn't always have to be a massive thing. But it's mostly about coming up with the idea. Innovation is putting the idea into practice. And those are clearly defined things, because you can have creativity without innovation. but it is impossible to innovate without first going through a creativity process. That comes first, and that always comes second. So this focus that we put in business on innovation kind of doesn't take into account the process and the time and the research that you need to put into the creativity part of it. Rose, did you want to say something?
No, sorry, I was just agreeing violently.
Because creativity is a process of exploratory research, of generating ideas, of editing down your ideas, of prototyping, of iterating and reiterating your ideas. And when you're really sure that you've got something really, really creative that you want to put into practice, you then put it into practice, and that's the innovation part. So we kind of get that mixed up quite a lot. And I was listening last week to a really great podcast. I can thoroughly recommend it. It's called the Productivity Puzzles podcast. And it's presented by a great guy called Professor Bart Van Ark from the Productivity Institute, which is a research institute in Manchester. And he's brilliant on productivity and how to get businesses to be more productive. But he was talking to Sir Charlie Mayfield. And Charlie Mayfield was the executive chair of John Lewis. He led John Lewis from about 2007 to 2020. He went on to advise the government on how to help businesses. He set up an organisation called Be the Business, which is a kind of federation of small businesses, but a bit more modern. And he was discussing how he took John Lewis, their retail business, which was shops, bricks and mortar, and how he took it online. And he was saying in this conversation that it was a huge culture change that required business model transformation. Every single part of that business had to change to take it online. The people, the product, the process, and the culture of the business had to change. And what he said was simply adopting online technology is not enough. It will not help with strategy and business model. Digitization, sorry, that's the online bit, and digitization has to go hand in hand with transformation. You can't just buy digital technology off the shelf and shoehorn it into your business. You have to transform the way you think in your business and the way that you do things. And he used blockbusters and Netflix as an example, because when blockbusters used to sell physical videos, you'd go into the Blockbuster shop, because I know there are some young people in this room, and you would rent a video, you'd take it home, you'd put it in your VHS player, and then you would take it back, a bit like a library book. And then streaming started, and Netflix started, and Blockbuster had the monopoly. And what they did was they looked at this upstart streaming company and thought, okay, well, we'll go online. So they set up an online platform where you could order your VHS. So they posted it to you, and then you watched it, and then you had to go and post it back to them. Meanwhile, Netflix, you just pressed a button and you started watching it. And obviously, Blockbuster went out of business within about 18 months. Because what they did is they bought the technology, but they didn't change their business model. They didn't transform their business. They didn't really think about anything other than bolting on some new technology. So new technology of any kind demands transformation, and transformation is at its heart a human culture exercise. And let's remember that culture eats strategy for breakfast, because it absolutely does. So back to the start of the talk, the £300 million job opportunity, or the 300 million job loss opportunity, isn't really what's happening. The big impact is culture change. And if you really, really want to leverage AI in your business, you have to think about how you organize yourself. You have to think about what your business model is and what your business model is going to be. And that these new tech tools work with us to complement and increase our human intelligence and not replace it. And it's what we would call techno-social revolution. It's not one or the other. We do it collaboratively, side by side. And it just made me think of something that this woman, Margaret Heffernan, said. And again, I'm a bit of a fangirl of Margaret Heffernan. She is a former CEO. She's an author. She's done 4 TED Talks. Her TED Talks have racked up about 15 million views. And she's currently Professor of Practice at Bath University. And she's written books about this. But her point is that all work is social. A business, a company is not an abstract thing. It's a group of people. We work together. And so AI technology might speed up the pace of business, but the interactions and the ideation and the creativity are all built on the quality of our human relationships. And that's what we should be paying attention to. The positive interactions between all the people involved in the business, both internally, the people who work in your business, and externally, the customers and stakeholders. So the really big opportunity that AI is bringing is culture change in how we organize ourselves and how we think, and how we enable people in our business to use the time that AI will free up for them. How are they going to use that creatively? Well, it's to apply that creative problem solving formula of Ruth Noller's, and we need to start teaching that. Basically, we need to start teaching it at school. We need to start teaching it in business. We need to start appreciating people coming up with great creativity ideas. Any questions so far?
Yeah, with lateral thinking, where does that kind of sit in the sort of domain of sort of creativity and innovation?
Well, lateral thinking is an Edward de Bono term, and I love Edward de Bono. So what he said was, when you become specialist at something and you repeat it, it's like rain falling on a mountain. You know, we driving is a really great example of that. If anybody drives here, you know, you concentrate on learning to drive, and then you do it and you do it more, and gradually it becomes part of your subconscious. So you can often get into the car and you'll be listening to the radio and you'll drive from A to B and you suddenly think, God, I can't even remember driving, because you're on automatic pilot. You've become really deep in your river experience. In order to think creatively, you need to get out of that river of experience and accept ideas from all over the place. And that's what lateral thinking is. And that's kind of the starting point of a creative problem solving process, which is to generate ideas. And there's another great story about the Japanese bullet train that it illustrates that point. The head engineer of the bullet train was tasked with speeding it up, but also reducing the acoustic bang that happened when the train went into a tunnel. The air compressed, and as it came out the other end, it would go poof. And it was literally taking birds out of the sky, insects were dying, it was just acoustically bombing everything. And they were trying to think of ways to reduce this acoustic blast because the train travels so fast. And they were thinking, well, what if we put a kind of funnel thing at the end of the tunnel? Would that dissipate the sound? But then they realized that it would when the train was going that way, but the funnel would then act as an amplifier when the train was going the other way, and it would make it worse. And you know, they had a whole team of engineers working on this for months, and they couldn't come up with an idea. And the head engineer was a fisherman. He took the weekend off and he went fishing, and he was standing there with his rod in the pond, and he was looking at this kingfisher diving into the water, coming out with fish. And what he noticed is that actually, when the kingfisher beak went through the water, it didn't make a ripple. It didn't do anything. It just went straight in the water, like it was glass. And so he took that idea back to his team, and they completely redesigned the nose cone of the train based on the kingfisher's beak, which is why the bullet train now has this really elongated nose. And what it did was it reduced the acoustic noise by about 60%. It also increased the speed of the train by 30%, which was a side benefit. But that is an example of lateral thinking. It's getting out of the office, it's turning your mind off, and that's actually what the human brain is designed to do. It's called combinational thinking, combining stuff that shouldn't go together. And that, I think, is a good example of how you would find that difficult to program into a computer, into a general intelligence, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't have a linear progression to it. It's just randomness. And it's our human brain that can make sense of it. So thank you for that question.
Right, welcome.
Yes.
Maybe along the same line, but where would you put visionary within those two things, in those categories? Because it's not, they might have a, like, say, not to make a topic, but just to exemplify, say, Elon Musk as an example. He's like, from my perspective, quite visionary, and he like turned various industries on its head. So how would he be, like, what was his thinking and treated as?
Well,
Sorry, I just asked you to repeat the question.
Yeah, I
please.
did.
Luna.
Yeah.
What Luna just said is, where would we put Elon Musk in the mix? Because Luna would say that Elon is quite visionary. He turns companies upside down. He's got that single-minded vision to get us to Mars. And where does he fit in the creativity mix? Is that what your question is?
How would he be categorized in the way he approached? Because he's kind of like been, whether it's PayPal, car industry, and now the Earth,
Yes.
the space.
Opportunistic.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But so the one thing that I would say is that we are built to be creative in teams. And this idea of the single inventor, the lonely inventor in the garret, is not really correct. It's a bit of an urban myth. Thomas Edison created a place called Menlo Park, and he put in there engineers, scientists, chemists. There was about 20 odd blokes in there and a few women just working on ideas. Edison patented them, and I think he has the most patents of anybody in the world, like hundreds of patents. And he came up with the electric light bulb and the speaker, but it was a team of people. And creativity and innovation is always the work of a team. It's never the work of a single person. So Elon is very good at generating ideas, brilliant ideas. Let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. And so he would be a generator. But you also need people in your team who can catch those ideas and make them work. So he can't work in isolation at all. He's lucky that he has gone to work in companies where they have quite good structures that enable him to freeform and think. But that by itself is not enough. You need structure to develop an idea, to test an idea. Those are the bits that he hates, But he's got a lot of energy, and he is a maverick explorer mind, but you also need a developer mind. And actually there's another analogy that I use, which is Apple, and we all know the story of Apple, but we know that it was Wozniak and Jobs. Who's the third employee of Apple?
I started shares for $100.
No, he made money. The third full-time employee was a guy called Mike Markula. And Wozniak told this story, not Jobs, was that he and Jobs were in their Jobs' parents' garage, and they were making these very crude computers with wooden keyboards and little bits of computing. And Jobs went to a local computer store, and he kind of was a great salesman. He talked the man into taking 50 of these computers. And he said, if they don't sell, I'll come back next month and I'll take them all back. So when he went back, the man went, well, he just sold like hotcakes. I'll have 150 next time. And he and Wozniak had no idea how to get enough materials, how to get money. So they found this guy called Mark Markulis, who I think was like a production or sales rep for Hewlett Packard. And he invested the money for them to create the next batch, and he became the production manager. And Wozniak said, if it was not for Mike Markulis, there would be no Apple, because we had no idea how to do the production of this stuff. We had the idea, but we didn't know how to make it at scale. We didn't know how to negotiate supply chain costs. We didn't know how to go to other shops and sell it into them. We didn't know how to organize ourselves. And that is a really good example of how just creativity on its own is not enough. You need a team that has all the skills. And what happened actually was, as Apple grew, Jobs, the maverick, the kind of Elon Musk figure in this thing, they got lots of investment in, And he called the investors and the accountants, the production people, the supply chain people, they were the suits. And his developers, he called the pirates. And he wouldn't go to meetings. His team were the crazy pirates. He hated the suits. And within 2.5 years of being of getting all the VC money, he was ousted in about 1985. And he was in the wilderness for 10 years. And meanwhile, the suits, the production side of the company kind of kept going, but wasn't innovating. And so within 10 years, in 1995, Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy, and they got Jobs to come back. But I think what happened in that 10 years where he was sort of out on his ear, he learned a bit of humility. And it was Jobs that went and personally found Tim Cook. Tim Cook came from a supply chain background. And in fact, Tim Cook was called a wizard in the dark arts of supply chain management. And I've never heard anyone make supply chain management sound so sexy. But Jobs recognised that what he needed was somebody who could do the dot the I's and cross the T's and have those conversations that he couldn't have. And together with Tim Cook, Jobs built Apple into the company it is today. So it's a really good example. And that's what Musk needs. Musk has to have that balance, has to have people around him to put his ideas into practice. And I think he does, because that's why his companies are so successful. Any other questions? Before we wrap up, I wanted just to show you what we've actually been working on for the last 4 years. So we started to think about how can we help businesses to think creatively without having to go to all the expense of becoming a master in business innovation or taking an MBA. And so we developed this tool called Business Sparks. It's for consultants, business leaders, directors, anyone involved in innovation and strategy. And it kind of helps companies to solve problems without needing expensive consultants, but it also helps consultants who can't afford to discount their time and to work with low fee paying clients. So it provides solutions, it reduces time, it saves time, it reduces costs. And it does it because we built it using both large language models, but also heuristic reasoning. And so instead of doing what ChatGPT or any of the chatbots do at the moment, you type in your challenge, and then the chatbot just tells you the answer. It's a bit like the computer says no sketch from the, well, it's not the Fast Show, it's Little Britain, yeah, it says no. And actually the chatbots are creating what's called algorithmic aversion amongst some people. They don't like being told what to do by a computer. We've come at it from a slightly different point of view, which is that you type in the problem that you have in your business, and then our AI starts asking you questions, actively asking questions back to you. So we have hundreds of questions hard-coded in the background. And what the language model is doing, it's reading the sort of the object and the subject and the verbs in your challenge, and then it's dropping them into these questions saying, if your challenge is this, have you thought about this? And what we do is we take people through a creative problem-solving process where it generates lots of ideas, and then it helps you to edit those ideas down. But it's like having a consultant working on the problem with you, but you can actually come up with solutions in a fraction of the time. And I've tried it out with MBA students. So they were set a traditional kind of challenge, which was around supermarket logistics. A supermarket chain has got a logistics issue, come up with some solutions that you can present back to the client. And they had some solutions, they'd worked on the problem, and then we gave them this tool. It's online, I'll give you the URL at the end, you can have a play yourselves. And they played with it for about 20 minutes. And I went in to talk to them. And one of them said to me, well, look, we put in our original kind of prompt that we were asked, and it came up with all the solutions that we have actually come up with, which I thought was quite good because that meant we were all over the same mark. He said, but it did it in about 3 seconds, and it took us 5 hours in a room with flip charts and post-it notes. And so then we put our solution in. We said, this is what we are going to do. And then it kind of reiterated, and it started asking them questions about their solution and had they thought of it from a supply chain issue, had they thought about it from this issue. And he said, and within about 10 minutes, we had refined our idea to something that we think is really brilliant. So that's how you can work with the computer as coach, as opposed to the computer just giving you the answer. Okay, so we're trying really hard to build tools that help people to think creatively, and they're kind of white box solutions. So we know where all the information is coming from, and most of it's coming out of the business school. But working, I think I've got another slide. Yeah, this was some of the feedback that I've had to date for Business Sparks. So one of the MBA students said that it outshines ChatGPT because it doesn't have these false informational links because it's a white box tool. A strategy director who used it with one of his international clients was like, wow, it's like having a consultant in the room. And we've actually been using it with a large international research and innovation team. And they found that what it did was it made them think about the problem from a perspective they hadn't thought of before. They got out of their river of experience and they started to think more laterally. So basically, everything that I've just been telling you, we've programmed into this tool, and I would really urge you to have a play with it. I'd love to have your feedback. I'm going to give you the URL in a minute. But these conversations led to some other conversations. Some of the people trying it said, what if I don't have just one query? What if I've got like a whole bunch of documents? What can you do? And Professor Neil Maiden, who I work with, really is a bit of a brainiac. And so he said, well, why don't we see if we can get the algorithm to give us some insights? So what this algorithm will do is if you have a whole library of information, so very often companies, and this is word information, not numeric data. Okay, so we make the distinction between data and information. So say you've got sector analysis reports, and you have patents, and you have press releases, and you have lots of other written reports that probably sit in some hard drive in a company and rarely get looked at. You put it all into the library of the Insights tool. And then what the Insights tool will do is it does topic analysis. So it will read them, and then it will say, you have got, it's a touch screen. You've got all these topics, which we would broadly say is, it's about bananas. But all of these topics are about apples, and all of these are about sausages. And this topic area is dealing with, rainbows, whatever. It doesn't matter. It will do this topic analysis. But then it is where the cleverness starts to happen. It will say within that topic, some are nearer to the sort of this to what a banana is, and some are more around the edges. So would you like to explore the less topical, the less common, or do you want to look at the really common stuff in this data? And then the bit that I think is quite genius is what's happening in the gaps between the data. So the algorithm now is looking at the gaps between the data, and what it will do is it will generate a list of opportunities out of your data for you to start to explore how you might leverage those opportunities. And so one of the companies that we're working with is a very, very large white goods manufacturer, and their R&D team trialed this, and they asked us if we would help them to build the library. And one of the things that they wanted in that library were patents in the categories that they were interested in. So they make appliances, they make domestic appliances. I can't tell you who they are because we're on an NDA, but so we downloaded all of these appliances from Europe and Asia in all the categories they were interested in. They also gave us all of their research documents, press releases, newspapers, and we put it all into this big library for them to then really kind of play with and try to rinse new ways, new ideas for their products. And the chief researcher said, that machine has just done in about 20 minutes, which I would take a whole team of people 6 months to do. He was just blown away, because that's the benefit of using large language models to help you slice and dice information. But it's quite a complex algorithm, and we're currently running lots of user testing with it. So that algorithm you can play with on application if you have a use test case that you'd like to trial it with. If you want to find out anything about either of those two, have a look at businesssparks.io. That's the website. There's a page on that website with insights information. I really would ask you to have a little play, because, you know, as I said to you earlier, I went to Web Summit in Lisbon, which is the largest tech summit outside of North America. I was there in November, 4 days. There's loads and loads of pitching stages for people to pitch their new business. They're all looking for investment. And I was there for the full 4 days, and I loved it. There was so much energy in the room. But every single pitch I saw, and I saw dozens of them, was people who had just built apps on top of ChatGPT-4. That's all they've done. They're just building a kind of drop window and then sending information back to ChatGPT. He's coming back with answers. I have yet to find, and I benchmark these products a lot, because my job is to try to get industry interested in them. I have yet to find anybody who is manipulating information and using language models to help people think in this way. This is like the next generation. I think we're a bit farther down the road. And Neil, to give him his due, the professor in charge of the project, has been doing this for about 10 years. It's just that OpenAI supercharged the whole environment 2 years ago, and now everybody's interested in it. So I think he's stolen the march. But, you know, it's hard to get this stuff out of the university and into the commercial world, but I am trying my damnedest. So yeah, give me your feedback. And that...
Can I be controversial?
Yeah.
Can I go back one slide to the insights?
Yeah.
And I've seen it, as you know. Would you say that's on the verge of being creative?
Well, what, the actual algorithm is on the verge of being creative?
Because you're talking about spaces in between the data, right?
Yes, but it's doing the knowledge and the evaluation, so it's evaluating the knowledge, but it would be the human who has to apply the imagination to the opportunity. So it's part of the creative process, and yes, it's much more creative than simply accepting what the chatbot is telling you, because it's interacting with your information. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's creative all by itself. Nice question though, but no, you didn't catch me. Yes.
You mentioned that you programmed in a bunch of questions. I was just wondering if those questions could possibly be generated instead of being hard-coded, and why you chose to hard-code over generating.
Because we wanted to make sure that the questions very specifically utilised the processes of creative problem solving. So there is Scamper, which is, it's another acronym. There's a Russian methodology called TRIZ. I don't know if I'm online actually. Oh, I can't, I'm sorry, on this machine.
I don't think you can.
No, I can't, I would have shown you it. But yes, so rather than worry about hallucinations or incorrect guidance, we've hard-coded all the guidance in. And so the algorithm will just drop bits of information into a predefined sentence, really, so that we know that it's robust, basically.
Exactly how many questions is required to cover this whole?
In the background, we've got a list of about, about 500 questions. But they all sit in slightly different buckets, and they can be endlessly shuffled and reworked. So although those 500 questions can generate hundreds and hundreds of suggestions. Yeah.
is there a relationship or correlation between a human being's age and their creativity?
Well, only in as much as society beats it out of you. So young children can be very creative because they have no limitations and they don't really know what anything's for. So it's easy for them to think creatively. What happens as we grow older is that we are pushed to conform to social norms and stereotypes and status, and we get affected as well. One of the interesting things that Ruth Noller proved in her research is the attitude, the force multiplier, which is your personal attitude, is positive. You have to bring a positive attitude if you want to really think creatively. And so for people who are depressed, who are constantly put down, you know, they will find it harder to think creatively. And my master's thesis actually was, I was trying to work out how much your what was it called? Your psychological resilience, it affects how much you can innovate in business. And it just so happened I was writing my thesis when we all got locked down. So the whole country had the same, or the whole of the business community had the same constraints imposed on it. And I put a questionnaire out on LinkedIn, and I got quite a lot of responses. And there were two parts of the questionnaire. One was about how much innovation was going on in your business and how much you were having to innovate. And of course, most people had to innovate a lot to keep trading through COVID once they were shut down. So there was a big pivot online. And the other part of the questionnaire was a psychological resilience test. So people who scored really low, people who, you know, some people scored the same kind of psychological profile as people who had cancer, you know, and they were running businesses. But that also correlated with the least amount of creative innovation going on in their business. They literally just didn't know what to do, and they felt depressed and miserable. And as the more miserable and depressed you feel, the harder it is to think creatively and to innovate, because your brain shuts down a bit. And when you're under a lot of pressure, it's a survival mechanism. You focus just on the stuff you need to get through the day to day, and it's almost impossible to get out of that and to think laterally, and you don't have the confidence to do it. So psychological things impact your ability to think creatively. Societal things impact your ability. So there should be no reason why age affects creativity, but it does, because, you know, we all get hurt by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, basically.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Just an observation, really. Ken Robinson on his TED talk, "The Schools Kill Creativity," 2006. 78 million people have seen it.
Oh yes, I've seen it. I've watched that.
I think everybody. I mean, it's fantastic, but it's 20 years now,
Yeah.
and they're still killing creativity.
Well, and Michael Gove, you know, when he redid the curriculum, he absolutely imposed testing rote and teaching to the test and making people do maths and Latin, and you know, it's like, and then they took all of the arts subjects out of the curriculum. And those are the very subjects that help you to think creatively, which is what we're going to need to thrive in this new world, basically. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk.